Okay, everyone please take your seats for the Publishers Panel, moderated by Karl, in which, among other things, Rick Welch will tell us why his Twitter handle is @KissMyAds, looks like. I'd like to hear that. That's not premium, just to let you know. Okay. It's a remnant Twitter handle, not a premium Twitter handle. It shows. There you go. Yeah.
All right, I'm sitting on this side because
It's just a disgruntled agency handle is what it was.
William's going to be here.
Okay.
Mr. Murray, you're one over.
Thank you.
Switch around.
There's seats up here if anybody wants to sit down. In front here.
3 ties?
I know, right?
I'm glad.
Nobody wearing the ad tech tuxedo. That's really, well, except you, Chris.
Well, I tried. I forgot my tie. But I'm impressed. 3 out of 5 is not bad. Are ties in now? Are we supposed to be wearing ties?
It's up to you.
All right. So I'd like to welcome our publisher panel. We heard the buy-side perspective before, and now we're going to hear the sell-side perspective. And you guys are going to prepare some questions for these guys to be thinking about. And they might have a question or two for each other. So I want them to introduce themselves. Todd, why don't you start?
Sure. I'm Todd Haskell. I'm the Senior Vice President, Chief Revenue Officer here at Hearst, and I think I'm the only one. So I actually oversee all of our revenue activities, both sort of the traditional direct as well as programmatic. So I work on an hourly basis with my colleague Mike Smith, who you heard from before. So glad to have everybody here at Hearst.
So I'm Eric Silverstein. I'm the Director of Programmatic Sales and Strategy over at Reader's Digest. So that's Reader's Digest, Taste of Home, Haven Home Media, and the Taste Network.
I'm Rick Welch, and I head up Programmatic for Condé Nast.
And I'm Bill Murray. I see on the slide there it says my title is Vice President of Programmatic Operations, but it's actually Sales Strategy and Planning. So similarly, I actually handle revenue operations, ad products, pricing, and planning for all digital activities.
Fantastic. Thanks, guys. All right, so disruption is kind of the flavor of the day, but and structure, when we get a bunch of premium publishers together, we like thinking about process, and everyone here wants to hear what you guys are doing because we're all trying to formulate our plans as we go into next year, thinking about how we structure the team, resource the team. How are you guys set up, Todd, here with your sales organization and the specific practice around programmatic monitoring?
Sure. Well, I mean, we recognize the dynamic that Barry Lowenthal spoke about in the agency panel, which is probably the single biggest obstacle to success is channel conflict, and it's competition between teams and things of that sort. So we just really decided to fundamentally make that go away. So we have a sales team across all of our 18 brands, give or take, and they're empowered to sell essentially any way the customer wants to buy from us. So they're out there with sponsorships and sort of traditional direct sales channels, but also premium programmatic and private exchange programs and things of that sort. And what we then do, recognizing that this is a very, very tricky, sophisticated channel of buying, we then partner them with an extraordinarily talented group of what we call sales engineers. So these are people who work for Mike Smith, who really understand how the technology works, how the engineering works, and I can dress them up and put them in front of customers. Right, Scott, both, who's here, wearing a suit today for the first time. I can dress them up and put them in there great in talking to customers about what it is that we can do to make it work.
How many engineers per office or salesperson?
They're probably, I think overall, they're about 4 or 5 people. They're all based here in New York, but they do travel.
Okay. Eric?
Yeah, so similar to that, but being much smaller, we have empowered our entire sales team to go out and sell any way that the customer would like it, especially programmatic. So I've worked with my team to really go out and educate our salespeople to go out and sell it in the best way possible. Instead of having a whole bunch of sales engineers, since we are smaller, I'm usually the one that goes out with our salespeople to make sure that the technical side is covered, but we do also have our ops team that helps out with that.
Kiss my ads.
Yep.
So we've been working on our structure for a while, and it has been, I guess, an iterative process. It has changed a few times over. But all along, I guess the end goal was kind of staff a programmatic team, build out our tech stack, educate each and every one of our titles, as well as our corporate sales team, and then kind of assimilate into the greater, I guess, structure of the company. So the end game is so that there isn't a programmatic team. At the moment, we're not there yet. There's still a lot more training that has to be done. But like these two guys already said, our sales reps can sell programmatically or traditionally booked. So they can sell either. They can sell data. And then we have some who are also hybrid print digital sellers who can also sell programmatically as well. And I will say we've recently started to integrate with our international team as well, which I think has been a huge step forward. So we can now sell outside of the U.S. as well. So a lot of the trading desks seem to be buying at more of a global level. So.
You've got one team per, there's entertainment, right? There's a couple different divisions. Todd, you guys have just one big group that sells all the titles?
For us, within the magazine company, yes, we have one group that sells everything.
Okay.
Same for, well, I mean, Condé is magazines and Advance is newspapers, so we have separate names for the two, but Advance is separate. We've tried to do some collaboration with Advance to try and, look more just easy to work with, which seems to be super important from the agency side and from the client side, right? At the end of the day, it seems like the qualifying factor in RFPing someone or buying, there's price, there's the name of the title, but there's also really ease of working with them, right?
Okay.
Seems to be very important. So,
Bill, how are you guys structured?
So our larger sales organization is staffed against kind of our major brands, our home, food, and travel brands. But within that, just in the last 2 months, we've kind of provided the education and materials necessary for them to be able to sell both direct and programmatic. We had a centralized kind of sales process, and what we found is that all of the buyers, instead of kind of having separate teams that might come to a traditional, maybe programmatic sales organization, they wanted to have those conversations in line with like a sponsorship conversation. And so in response to that, we decentralized that. We do have a centralized programmatic operations team. And like you said, when the conversations get more technical, that's kind of when we'll get ourselves involved and make sure that we can actually execute on the deal.
Okay. This the RFP, the RFP is to some of us has been a pain point in the process of selling media. It's a very quarterly driven marketplace, but we still get RFPs. The trading desks are still issuing RFPs. We see them come into the market. Do you, when you guys go into a conversation with an agency like Omnicom or IPG, and there are two different groups that, let's say it's one client, and how many people? What does that sales call look like? How do you staff your team to go down and take that conversation down? Todd.
So are you asking if talking to the trading desk versus like a specific sort of investment
Let's say it's an
team?
account. Let's say it's an account lead. It's where you're just talking about they want to do a deal with Hearst. Who do you bring, and how does that?
Sure. I think increasingly, let's assume that you're going to have a sales leader who's going to be there. I think as with a lot of my partners here, we have a complicated structure because we've got people who sit on the print side of the house, although they don't like to be called that. They're the integrated side of the house. So very often we're working with them. So that's a four-legged sales call right off the bat. Then if we know what it is that the customer is going to be looking for, we're going to bring additional people based upon what those needs are. So, it might be somebody from our editorial team. It might be somebody from our programmatic or one of the teams, whatever one of our specialties are. But it's created a very interesting dynamic because, salespeople, and I think we all recognize this who work with salespeople love A, control, and B, attention. So they're generally not comfortable in traveling, like a gang, because they want control and ownership.
Right.
And what we've had to do is really sort of culturalize around the idea that bringing expertise and bringing different perspective and different skills into a meeting with your customer actually is a good thing. You will be more successful. Your customer will be happier with the eventual outcome. So, what it's really about is trying to figure out at what point do you bring in those additional people. So very often it might just be, the sales guys or saleswoman is going to go first, has that preliminary meeting, and then says, okay, who do I need to bring to the second call?
Okay.
Yeah, so, again, fairly similar, but a lot of times we will have the salesperson along with one of our digital leads, whether that's our digital publisher or myself, to go along and be able to speak towards any type of technical side if programmatic is the discussion. Hopefully the salesperson has done their research prior, so we know a little bit more. But once the conversation gets deeper, we'll start to bring in some of the marketing folks and editorial folks if that's necessary. But we'll usually start with your digital team and then your lead salesperson.
I hate to sound cookie cutter and like I'm repeating everything they're saying. We are set up very similarly. I will say a few differences. Traditionally, I've seen that sometimes we tend to bring too many people to the table, and I think we've recently taken a step back and tried to do that more. Okay, salesperson, go in, scout the scenery there, and decide who's most important to bring, right? Like, is it the data person? Is it the programmatic person? And so we do have these corporate partnership directors who are essentially integrated sellers who own the top 100 accounts. Outside of those top 100 accounts, it's either brand specific, like the GQ sales team will go talk to them, or whatever title it may be. So the only accounts that have an individual dedicated person are the top 100. And then we have a dedicated digital sales team who own a lot of the agency relationships.
Do you have goals? In next year, will you have programmatic goals and direct goals? Because I think sometimes it makes it hard to combine efforts if you've got two different goals.
At the salesperson level?
Yeah.
No, we will have a revenue goal.
Okay.
Yep. So
we don't care how we get there.
Okay.
So right now we have a programmatic team goal, but we are pushing for that we have one digital number, and however we get there, the individual sellers are compensated. It doesn't matter which way they sell it, right? But the long term for us is to kind of assimilate that programmatic team so that it's not a separate, just a separate division.
Okay.
Yeah, we
Similar.
very similar. We kind of try to do our homework before the meetings. Very account specific. Certain advertisers are interested in operating with us, in particular ways. And what we do is really try to do a good job of preparing the sales team, where we'll bring the experts into the meeting to help build the deck and make sure that we're conveying the appropriate information. Once we get past that, kind of generating a certain level of interest, that's when we bring the experts in to actually have a second meeting to discuss more kind of specifics.
When you guys now look ahead and you see things changing with how the agencies are coming into market, are you starting to see language on RFPs change? Are there asks that are more specific to direct connectivity? How are you guys thinking about the RFP of the future? What does it look like? How do you do private marketplace deals? Because all I've heard from many of you is that private marketplace deals have a hard time working because of the issues we've been talking about.
I don't know.
Rick, do you want us to take that?
Sure. So I see a lot of RFIs, RFPs, and I will say that I don't know. I mean, when we make our proposal, it's essentially the same stuff with the exception of maybe a tent pole like Vanity Fair Red Carpet or Women of the Year GQ. Those sponsorships still go to the titles to sell. But other than that, essentially anything can be done programmatically or traditionally booked, right? And so the proposal kind of looks the same. When they say I want to see a programmatic proposal versus a traditionally booked proposal, we try to make them look the same because at the end of the day, you're still getting our audience and our content, and we consider that premium. And one of the qualifying questions I tell all of our sellers to ask is, okay, you want to do programmatic. When they bring up that word, right? When they bring up programmatic, first off, if they put an S on the end of programmatic, then we immediately know they have no idea what they're talking about. But when they say, I want the programmatics, but when they say, and the data, I need the data, it's very vague in general. No, but when they say, I want to run this programmatically, we say, okay, who's your platform of choice? Do you have a trading desk? Do you have a DSP in mind? And if they don't, 9 times out of 10, they called out programmatic was because they wanted a price discount. And a lot of them don't even understand that they have to manage the campaign. They think we manage it. They hear automation. I think automation is not the greatest word for this because people think set it and forget it. They think autopilot. If you want that, go to an ad network, managed service campaign. For us, we qualify with who is your platform and then what are you trying to achieve. So to go back to your question, the RFP, it's all around what they're trying to achieve. If it's DR oriented, I'm going to offer one thing. If it's, and it doesn't matter which way they access it. It's all about the KPIs. So programmatic, again, is going to blend into our general team.
Todd, how are you?
Yeah, I mean, generally, I think if you find out in an RFP that they're buying programmatically, you're screwed right off the bat. Because in all likelihood, that's a conversation that should have been happening over a significant period of time.
Right.
And if somebody drops it in and says, okay, define your programmatic strategy in cell C4 of your Excel spreadsheet, just give up.
Right.
So what we really try to do and what we've seen the most success in is really trying to get way ahead of the RFP and be talking to our most important customers, which are increasingly becoming a broader sort of swath of our largest customers. It used to be just a few years ago, the rap against the luxury community is that luxury will never go programmatic because they felt they couldn't guarantee brand safety. There's environment, share a page, creative formats, all the rest. Well, one after another, those are all being checked off, and through partnerships like we have with Sonobi, those are no longer an issue. So what's really important is educating the customers to what it is that we, in conjunction with our technology partners, are capable of, so that we can bring some really smart insight and bring what our data that we can leverage to the customer so that we can do something a lot more sophisticated. And so that's how we think about it.
Okay. Eric?
Yeah, I mean, we've definitely seen it on some RFPs, and we try to package it up in a very similar fashion that we do direct. I mean, we'll have our sponsorship opportunities at the top, but anything that can be executed programmatically, we put that out as an offer. I tend to agree. If it's on there to begin with, you're kind of screwed. But we try and play in that court a little bit. But if we didn't know prior, and now we know that they're looking for a programmatic execution, we're on those salespeople to get those meetings so we can get a more in-depth look as to exactly what they're looking for and how all of our different executions can really help their specific goals.
Bill?
Yeah, it's I think one of your original questions was what's the kind of future RFP look like, and I think it looks exactly the same. It's just the method of communication is different, right? We make everything that we sell directly available programmatically because we believe that the efficiencies don't just benefit us, they benefit our advertisers and agency partners as well. However, in a lot of the RFPs that we see, when programmatic is referenced, they are specifically looking for, I like all of this, and then I'm looking for something that can help me kind of lower the effective CPM of the buy that I am making with you. And look, we generally believe that there should be more value associated with this type of transaction, and so we'll oftentimes actually try to discourage them from just thinking about it that way and trying to be a little bit more creative with how they're leveraging these automated channels for audience buying. Because in the end, I understand the effective effective CPM of a total buy is important, but it's also about the ROI on the back end. So if we can get creative and actually help improve that through means where the CPMs aren't necessarily as low, everybody kind of benefits from that.
We have a script, basically, it's something I made up, but but it seems to work. So when someone really digs in on rate and that's all they're interested in, we kind of have well, if rate isn't the impetus for programmatic, what is the point of programmatic? And it's just a couple of bullet points on, audience targeting, increased control, analytics, and aggregation, streamlining of billing. And that's essentially what it says, and handed out to some clients who maybe are a little less savvy, who have been, have had it hammered into their head that programmatic means cheap and means DR only. So it's a nice little response, and it kind of resets the conversation.
Okay. Are you guys, when you think about the source of the demand that's coming down these channels, everybody always talks about let's stop dealing with remnant monetization for programmatic. Let's start really thinking about how you unlock value and premium spend from the big brand advertisers. Are you starting to see some of those deals trying to fight their way in to get access to your audience via the trading desks? Are they having success in pulling the budgets down to get automated through their workflow, through that automation? Todd?
Yes, I mean, I think it's still relatively early days, but I think we're starting to see that. I think, as we said before, I think as the marketplace, and particularly on the client side, is becoming more educated about why should they be doing this, I think they're putting more and more pressure on their buying partners to sort of approach this the right way. So, I think it was interesting in the last panel, I think the question was, what are some of the key themes for the coming year, one of which is education. And I think as clients are more educated, the very dynamic that you described is going to start to shift more in a more accelerated fashion.
Do you see that shifting through the trading operations, or do you see this other direct marketplace?
Yes.
Both.
Both.
Eric, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, we've started to see it in some of our conversations. It's trying to creep its way up. But I think it's, price is going to have to, move up there. It's kind of like what we discussed in the previous panel. It's the only way that you're going to be able to get into the right form of inventory.
Yeah, the vast majority of what we're doing, it doesn't have a network intermediary. I mean, we have a conversation with the client at the end of the day, so we still have that sales relationship. We still have that client services relationship. And that's why we kind of demand from trading desks and DSPs, transparency. We're trying to avoid arbitrage as much as possible. And so the vast majority of what we're doing right now programmatically is PMP. And it is, I try not to use the word direct versus programmatic. I try to use traditionally booked or IO-based or something like that, because, using the word direct versus programmatic kind of implies that the programmatic team or individuals talking about programmatic aren't speaking to the client or aren't speaking to the agency, and we are. So, we are having that one-to-one conversation still, whether it's programmatic or whether it's, traditionally booked, whatever.
Bill?
Yeah, agreed. I mean, one of the things that we are trying to do is get out kind of ahead of the RFP process. We're very heavily involved with a lot of our programmatic and direct partners in leveraging our first-party data, trying to kind of, create value for them. And as a result, I think we're making a strong enough case that the offerings that we're making available programmatically warrant high enough rates that we're able to have them compete directly against our direct sold campaigns.
I think it's interesting. Agencies or buyers tend to want to maybe combine a lot of data and whittle down to left-handed people that like to cook in Michigan and that kind of stuff. I think that the trade for a seller maybe is more, look, buyer, you want to buy your audience on a prioritized basis with me, fantastic. I'd also like you to buy my intent data that I have. Are you guys, Rick, how are you guys thinking about that first-party publisher data in a transaction on a PMP basis? Are you?
This is a tricky subject for me because I was at a data provider for 4 years, so I was a little biased about that data being the best data in the world, transactional data. So now that I'm on the publisher side, I do see value in our data. It's just got to be used for different purposes. The one frustrating part around data is that I feel like when people ask about it, they just say, I want access to the data. I'm like, well, what does that mean? Like, what does that mean economically, financially for us, and what are you going to use it for? And there are a lot of questions around that. Because obviously, if I go back to the executive team and I'm like, we're just going to pipe all of our data to this trading desk. It's going to be great. And I don't have, a financial summary around what that means or what they're going to use it for, I'll get laughed out of the room. So the data conversation is interesting for us. Right now, we keep it in-house. Any campaign that has our data on it is managed in-house. And some people do find great value in it. It doesn't work for others. Really depends on the metrics. Ours is based off of essentially a preferred subscriber network, a large pool of our subscribers that we survey, in a very in-depth manner. And it is based on their preferences when it comes to purchasing items and stuff like that. So yeah, we do have our own data and we do sell it actively.
But data is not an individual thing. It's data plus media.
Yeah, it's not. I know they have a much bigger data team than we do. We have a data team, but it's smaller than core.
And so we have Core Audience, which is a business within the Hearst Corporation, and they're much more in the data business per se. Within the media operation, within the magazine company, we really look at it, I think, in a very similar way, which is data as a means to an end, which is how can we sort of drive more value for us and for the advertiser. But we tend to also take a very similar approach, which is that we need to have a degree of control over it. But with that said, we're also really interested in partnering with buyers and other entities within the marketplace to think about how to use that data in sort of new and sophisticated ways. We're doing some interesting things. When Barry was here before, we're doing some stuff with Varick, where we're creating some sort of unique segmentation products with them. But that's the kind of thing that we can do with anybody, and we're really excited about that. The great thing about it is we can't do it without the plumbing and the expertise that comes from the people like our core audience team and Mike Smith's team and all the rest. All of a sudden, it lets us unlock value that we would not have access to otherwise.
Right. Excellent point. Bill, you guys have a data strategy, audience strategy. Is your data internal, or do you leverage it in any way in the external market?
Yeah, we will make kind of generic audience segments available based on our first-party data, available to kind of open partners. We'll create unique custom data segments and make those available publicly to specific partners. And I think the difference between the two is when we get into kind of giving this, open access to specific advertisers, what we ask in return is some form of data sharing. And it differs greatly based on the type of partner we're working with and how much, information is actually involved. But again, it's one of these things where, advertisers, point of sale data, they do not want to give us access to point of sale data. But it's pretty easy to make an argument that if they do share that information back, we can actually better inform the data that we're providing to them, the amount of that data that we're collecting, and ultimately pass that value back to them. Again, selfishly, we get the feedback that we need to help kind of build out bigger, more valuable audience segments. But I think that we've had a lot of success with a few partners sharing information, and I think have mutually benefited from it.
We've done that with mostly luxury guys, as you can imagine.
Mm-hmm. When luxury guys come in, I always think you guys, the legacy of magazines transitioning that category into this category, there's a lot, that's a pretty big leap to make across the data, automation, programmatic.
Some of them are
how do those meetings go? How do they go at Estee when you're over at Estee Lauder?
I'm not going to comment on any particular client. Other than the fact, what I will say is that they're getting increasingly comfortable. What a lot of them are doing is they're internalizing those kinds of that kind of expertise. Mm-hmm. So I will give you an example. It's like at Gucci. So the guy who runs global digital for Gucci used to work for me when I was at the New York Times. Mm-hmm. So he's a very smart, very sophisticated guy who's brought the sort of the sell side into a global luxury brand. Mm-hmm. And I think if you go around to most of the big holding companies, the luxury groups, they've got a lot of those people like that, whether they came from the ad tech mm-hmm. side, from publisher, from agency community, and that's how they're doing it. Because if you're a communications director at a maison, they're not going to get it. Yeah. They're just not.
You see Burberry is pretty advanced as well.
Right.
Right.
I'll call them out as well.
Yeah. So I've got a million questions that I want to ask, but my final one that I want to ask that I didn't get to with the other guys is this self-directed marketer, this marketer that is staffing, bringing people in. Is this a trend, or is this something that you think CRM starts to be brought in-house and activated in a way that media is separate from? What are we looking at in the future? More clients using tech to buy media or less? And then where does that leave the agencies?
We can start that end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At the end, you'll have to explain why I was last in every question. But
More Kellogg's type?
yeah, look, I don't know. I think it depends probably on the size and amount of media spend that an advertiser has access to. I think that the agencies have done, and the trading desks have done a great job of educating a lot of these marketers on how to execute in this fashion. I think that you've seen the larger ones that have money that are able to invest in larger platforms decide to do so and take it in-house. I think the thing that I don't know if I have an answer. I think that because the reason I think I'm a little bit uncertain is that the DSPs have positioned themselves now very well to integrate with almost any organization. And so the ability for an advertiser who has a $10 million spend and an advertiser that has a $1 billion spend to be able to manage their relative budgets, it's almost the same. So that's where I'm a little confused, but I don't know how well I answered the question.
Guys, what do you think?
You go.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I'm leaning towards the fact that they probably will start to bring more and more of that in-house. I feel like it could be possibly more lucrative, but I do agree that I think the trading desks and DSPs have done a phenomenal job so far. But I think, and I don't know if this is jumping to a further question that you might have, but next year and the following years, I think, like we've already discussed, consolidation it has to happen. So I'm kind of hedging my bets in that direction. I could totally be wrong, but that's where my head's at because I think it's got to happen.
Okay.
I've been hoping for consolidation for a while. I think standardization would be even better, at least the terms. Let's get together and say these are our terms, but I feel like we're still all over the place on that. But as far as bringing the talent in-house versus keeping it out with the agencies, I think it'll still be subjective. It always has been with clients and their agency models, right? Mm-hmm. One client has 5 agencies, one client has 1 agency. So I don't know. I think each marketer will still make up their own mind about what that setup looks like.
It actually, if there's a standard on the sell side, it really doesn't matter where the demand comes from. So that I think is...
Doesn't matter to me, yeah, as long as people aren't ripping 40% margins off my inventory,
right.
And reselling it.
And I think ultimately what it will come down to is clients feeling what is the way that we're going to make sure that our investments are done purely based upon their interests. Right. And I think that obviously if the technology all of a sudden is allowing in-source people to plug into platforms like yours that are going to let them sort of tap into collective expertise in engineering that are going to create a marketplace where the buyer can then say, okay, you know what, I'm going to be able to flow my dollars through this, and the only thing that will be of paramount is how to get the greatest return on my investment. That's the way the dollars are going to go. I think the reason why there's pressure for that is there are a lot of clients who wonder whether it's the trading desk or whatever, that there are other motivations that are guiding how dollars are being spent, and whether it's at the agency holding group level or what have you. So they're going to want to go to paths where they know exactly why decisions are being made. But what I think that also means is that for those of us who are in the content business, because ultimately, we're all content producers, and then we're looking to try to figure out how to monetize that. So ultimately, what it's going to result in is just a bifurcated market. They're going to look to come to us to come for content creation and integration and really high-touch, beautiful things that we can do as a community. And then they're going to come to us via technology for the other stuff. And then it's really up to the agency to figure out where they fit into that mix.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good. We're going to open up to questions. got a question.
Thank
You
you.
got this?
I feel like it's midnight up here.
I have a question regarding education. We've talked quite a bit about it on today's panel as well as on the earlier panel with the agency folks. What are your recommendations for properly educating a team, and what should someone do if they don't have resources in-house? There are a couple of programmatic consulting firms out there. I'd like to know if anyone has ever considered using those or use them. And also, who do you think needs education more, on the buy side or the sell side?
That's a good question.
Yeah, I've worked with some of in the past, some of those the consultant operations. If you don't have the bandwidth to have somebody in your organization, it's certainly better than nothing. You don't want to be the guy wandering around in a dark room trying to find the walls. But I think what it's really about is we as publishers, and I think you see some great people, whether it's people like Mike Smith and his team, the gentleman on the panel with me. You have to bring the expertise in-house. I think trying to do this by borrowing and hiring out people to train your people, I just think they have to be available to work with your sales team who've got a lot of really compelling challenges in front of them. I just think trying to occasionally have a trainer come in and then leave and send them off on their way to do their thing, I just think it's almost inevitably going to fail. You have to have the talent in-house.
I'll agree with that, and I'll say on the consulting side, it seems like if you have someone with real-world experience doing this stuff themselves, that's great. You have them come in and kind of advise on how to staff, stuff like that, and what that strategy and plan looks like. But when it comes to the education, having someone on call is just, it's important. Not just because that's my job, but.
I will say, too, one of the things where we've had success is in the initial training, because I completely agree, there have to be people on the team that are experts. We've actually had a lot of success with bringing vendors in because they can bring the perspective, they can bring best practices without paying a consultant. So we'll have all of our different vendors come in, kind of
And bring lunch sometimes.
Yeah,
and
we
very
do our
nice
one-on-one.
lunches. Yeah.
Every month we have one come in.
Yeah, no, but I mean it's very helpful, right? Because again, they can without divulging who the other partners are, they can talk about where they're seeing successes in the marketplace, and but you do have to have that. There has to be some core there of expertise within the organization.
Chris, I don't think you've ever bought me lunch.
Come on. You got to leave the building once in a while.
Doug bought me lunch.
So any other questions? Must have questions for these guys. How about questions for each other too, guys, if you haven't asked them behind closed doors? Any questions out there in the corner?
Hi, Chris Andrew, iCrossing. So disclosure, we're owned by Hearst. So, but I've been to a number of, heard a lot of things today about programmatic big data. One of the things that I think is missing, especially when I'm thinking of what the publishers bring to the table, because I'm on the buying side, is I'll pay more if you improve the customer experience. I'll pay more if I can get better creative in front of the right people, and then I'll be able to. My job is to sell in the right price. Mm-hmm. I can do that with my clients. But what are you guys doing to leverage the amount of data that you have to improve the customer experience? Because that's what we're all here for, whether it's higher funnel, lower funnel. What are you guys doing internally to kind of make that case as well from the publishing side?
Sure.
I mean, one of the things Sonobi does as a standard part of our pub side integration is enable custom ad formats, certain types of custom ad formats. That has to relate with the advertising piece. Your question may be tied also to the content piece. But in terms of the ads that will be seen across the premium supply partners that we have, we enable IAB rising star units, lightbox units, more customizable ad formats than the standard same old stuff.
I think one thing that we've looked at, first of all, is deploying technology to something we call the audience engine, which is really looking at the data of what a reader has been consuming on our properties over whatever the last 30 to 60 days. and then actively feed them content that we think will be of the greatest interest to them. So essentially, it's what Amazon's been doing forever, but we're injecting that into a content experience. Then what we can then do is then use that same data to drive a differentiated ad experience. So, one of the things that we try to think about is that traditionally in the print world, where all of our brands originated for the most part, more advertising for print meant a better reader experience. Just the way it's always been. People love the big, thick September issues, tons of ads, whatever. Online, that has not been the case. More ads generally means a worse experience. What we want to try to do is think about exactly the point you brought up, which is how can we leverage data and technology to make a better reader experience, a better advertiser experience. Ultimately, it's going to result in improved performance and really make the customer happy.
And greater spend.
Exactly.
We could go over to Rockefeller Center and see NBC sitting on the hundreds of millions of dollars that they don't have to justify like we seem to all the time. So I think if you improve that customer experience, it's going to have a cascade effect as well.
The same data team that we have that's kind of supporting our advertising organization is the same data team that supports our programming organization and helping them understand what content they build. Both of those, inputs are coming into the same location and being managed by the same team. And that group's really started to do a good job of sharing that information back and forth. So we can understand, how much of an ad footprint is optimal on a given page. What type of ad formats work better in recipe pages than they do, next to a piece of video content. It's the same group because it's super important because not only will we get better engagement, we'll start to get more users. If we can improve that experience and create complementary, ad experiences to the content that's sitting there, again, it's one of these situations where everybody wins. Advertisers get better engagement, we get more users. Yeah.
And we're set up the same way, and we're finally standardizing all of our publications so that they have the same units, they accept the same high-impact units, and they accept the same usage of data so that you can really start to do this at scale. So you can create that unique user experience, but you can do it across all of our titles, which I think it sounds basic, but it was a big win for us with 21 titles. So.
Any other questions? Yes.
John Brown, Taunton Interactive, not owned by Hearst. So, Bill, I wanted to follow up on a comment you made earlier.
Sure.
You said that as Scripps, excuse me, you said at Scripps, everything that's available for direct sales is available for programmatic sales. So the follow-up to you is, really? Is it everything? And then the question for the rest of the panelists is, where do you guys draw the line on what's available for programmatic versus direct sales?
Yeah, I mean, I can't think of anything that's not digitally. Television's not, but digitally, I can't think of anything that's not available. Again, because if somebody, as an example, were interested in buying one of our larger tentpole, kind of events, but they said, "Hey, we'd like to execute this through, through one of the exchanges." That's fine with us. If they're interested in kind of automating that workflow on the back end, the product itself is still executed in the same fashion. It's just the buying mechanisms change. So we don't segment out any inventory. We don't. Our full product catalog might not be available to the entire market yet, but it's just because the product catalog is so large, we maybe put out our top 200.
I'll say the technological limitations have stopped most of what's not available right now. There will still be like I said earlier, the Vanity Fair red carpet and the Women of the Year GQ, those 10 polls that they will still sell as a title, as their core, because they're individual brands. But when it comes to things at scale, that's where corporate comes into play, and that's where programmatic comes more into play. And we've just started doing video programmatically solely because we didn't have the inventory before. We were sold out. But the data is kept in-house for now, and native is kept in-house. But other than that, everything else, rising stars, high-impact units, mastheads, light boxes, all that stuff is available. And then some stuff with our subscriber data, we'll work with trading desks on that. So yeah, we're getting there. It's most of our stuff is available programmatically, not quite all of it.
Yeah, same thing with us. I mean, we're really trying to offer as much as we possibly can programmatically. I mean, there's a few custom integrations that we have on a few of our sites. When it comes to recipe integration on Taste of Home, that we can't exactly execute on programmatically yet because of the back end integration. But we're aiming to get down that road. But when it comes to data, any of the rising star units, video native, we're really trying to be able to offer that programmatically, because at the end of the day, we're looking at it as an execution change versus the actual product change.
You do most of it automated guaranteed, right?
I think there's a couple. I mean, there are some, to your credit on that question, there are some nuances around enabled programmatically and actually prioritized in a way that gives it full right of way to scale. I think therein lies the nuance of what your individual operations teams deal with on a day-to-day basis.
I mean, in a DSP environment, there were still, from SSP to DSP, there were still problems with tandems, right? Which, the luxury guys, as we know, is 100% share of voice. That's how they buy. So not being able to do that kind of limits what they can and can't do. So we say, okay, do automated guaranteed, but then they can't apply audience data. So there's still some limitations there from an executional standpoint that stops us from offering everything programmatically, but we'll get there.
Okay. Another question?
Gretchen Grant with Fila Media. To follow up on John's question, why are you making everything available programmatically? Is it that the advertisers are really forcing you to go in that direction? Are there benefits that really accrue just to you, where, separate and aside from what advertisers may ask you to do, you would choose to go all programmatically with all of your various services?
I get the reason that we have enabled all of our inventory to be made available is because if an advertiser is willing to buy through a programmatic channel at a rate that will compete or beat something that's direct sold, there's no reason we shouldn't take that. The yield management team falls within my organization as well, so they're able to kind of track trends against how much indirect activity is outpacing our direct sold activity, and then we can adjust our forecast based on that as well moving forward. So it's really just it's kind of another sales channel for us. I think our sales leadership, our executive team has done a very good job of kind of calming the nerves on the channel conflict side. And so as such, look, there are, whatever the number was, $10 billion being transacted on programmatically every year. If we weren't to make all of our inventory available there, we're kind of saying, well, we want access to this side, but not that $10 billion. And for us, we want to make sure that we want to be competitive.
I don't think there's a choice of whether or not to accept programmatic demand. It's really a question of how you manage it.
Mm-hmm.
One more question, and then we're going to switch to the next up front.
How you doing? Dave Rivera from the Weather Channel. So, I mean, it sounds like a lot of what is being sold in the programmatic space right now is like priority access within that ad server. What do you see as being like the next generation of this? So, like, are you developing any like programmatic products that are differentiating you outside of just being an inventory source? Because I think that priority access is, I think we heard it on the last panel, we're becoming a commodity in some ways, where I'll just go and get that cheaper somewhere else.
Sure.
As
As a former Weather Channel employee, I'll take that one. Yeah, we absolutely. I think it's a lot of it's our first-party data. Similar to like weather effects. We're looking at things like creating kind of lifestyle models where we're taking kind of all of a human's interactions, understanding what they are, and best times to maybe associate a brand with them. It's event-based things, so we have a lot of brands that have, where we have specific events, 4th of July as an example, which I know is a big one at Weather. Food Network, 4th of July makes a lot of sense. Recipes, contextual targeting. Like, we're absolutely looking to try to automate as much of we're trying to create as much value in these automated environments as possible. Totally agree with you. Just managing the waterfall, it's great right now. In a year, it might not really be a good way to differentiate yourself. So yeah, we're very focused on it.
And custom ad formats fall in that bucket. Other types of data segments. The notion of always-on guaranteed access to the buyer's customer. That's a great ad product.
I will say programmatically, we're not bifurcating what products we're rolling out, traditionally booked versus programmatic. It's just Condé Nast Digital. We're in the business of creating great content and curating a great audience. It's not, we're not in the technology business. We're going to let Turn and Google and Sonobi and all those guys do that stuff. We're going to give you a great audience and great content, and you do with it what you see fit. And then as far as digital products go, it doesn't matter which way you buy it. So I'm not going to say I have a programmatic product that's separate from my digital team. That goes against my philosophy of just one team, one dream digitally. So.
One team, one
We're going to end that.
Yes.
One team, one dream. So I want to thank these guys for their